Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Gaelic Lives podcast. We have a different feature podcast for everyone today. I'm joined by former Monaghan footballer Chris McGuinness, and we're going to reflect on his career, both in the blue and white and the maroon and white of Ballybay as well. So, Chris, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. How's things?
Not too bad, Sean. Thanks for having me. Keeping the best.
Reminiscing a bit here, Chris. How's the old memory?
It's not too bad. Had to do a wee bit of prep work for it. But it kind of comes back in the mind when you start to think about it, So it's not too bad.
I suppose the way these things usually start, Chris, is going back to childhood and growing up and stuff. And was it a football mad household you grew up in, or when did Gaelic football come into your life, I suppose?
Yeah, it probably came at a very young age. I suppose my two parents were hugely influential in encouraging us, myself and my brother, to play football, Gaelic football for Ballybay. My father would have played for Ballybay in the 80s and 90s, so I suppose that was the foundation for it. My two grandfathers would have been steeped in GA as well, so I probably owe it to my parents that they brought me to every Ballybay football game, be that juveniles or senior matches. Every week there was a game on. We seemed to be at them. So great memories of growing up being at football matches, and I suppose that probably ignited me desire to go on and play for Ballybay from such a young age,
Was it just Gaelic, Chris, or did you play any other types of sport, or was it just all football?
Yeah, it was all Gaelic. Our club, funny enough, our club did win a senior hurling championship. I think it could have been 85 or 89, maybe in the 70s. But that was a once-off. I think it's the first year they ever put a team into it. But we're not a hurling club; we're just solely Gaelic football. So it was probably easy enough for us to keep at the Gaelic football because there was no other, I suppose, competitive sports competing against Gaelic football.
What was it like growing up in terms of going to the Ballybay games that you mentioned and going to the Monaghan games and stuff? Like what was your first involvement? Was it, do you remember sort of getting involved in football and playing yourself? Like, do you remember your first sort of memories?
I do. Funny, I'm a strong enough memory of going to my first under 10 training. I think it was probably 7 or 8 years of age. I do remember because it distinctly stands out for me because I felt like I'd missed a few of the first trainings, so I was kind of one of the new fellas coming, and the lads that was with me at school, they seemed to be there a couple of training sessions, a couple of weeks in advance. But it was like just joining them on the schoolyard. It was quick enough to get into the thick of the action. But at the time, when I look back, comparing these years with back when I started, like there's under 4s, under 6s, under 8s now. Back when we were starting, it was probably started at under 10s. So yep, I probably started maybe when if you were decent enough 7-year-old to start at under 10s, But other than that, you mightn't have been involved in collective training maybe until you're 8 or 9. So it's funny how they've reduced or lowered the age groups in today's day and age, that you have we have a little kickers group there in our own club, which is kind of targeted towards under 4s and 5s, but it's more just having a bit of fun and working on different movement and just kind of balancing kind of wee bits of fun and games, So back when it was us, the ball was through in and everyone was just going after the ball.
Every month themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it always the ambition to play for Monaghan, Chris? Or was it obviously Ballybay first? And was there always a sense that you wanted to go on a bit further and play for Monaghan as well?
Yeah, I suppose when I think about it, it was Ballybay first and foremost, and then the development squads probably started to take shape around 2002 onwards in Monaghan. And I suppose I was on the 14s in 2004, and that was my first kind of experience of being part of a Monaghan county development squad. So my first experience of that was making that development squad. And I suppose that helped. I suppose you were channeled into, believing, right, you're part of a development squad here that is going to progress on to under 15s, under 16s, and arrive at minor, and then 21, and eventually get to senior level. But I do remember the coaches and the managers at the time saying that the numbers were quite small in terms of how many players actually make it from under 14s right through the ranks up to senior. I think they might have said maybe 2 and 3 players come out of a given year of development squad. So you knew the odds were kind of stacked against you. You might have been dealing with a development squad of maybe 25 to 30 players, So there you're sitting in a room with 30 lads and you're going, Jesus, will I be one of these 2 or 3 that'll make it? And thankfully we had a strong year that came through. We probably turned that stat on its head. We had the likes in my year development squads, you had the likes of Kieran Hughes, you had the likes of Colin Walsh, Fintan Kelly, myself. There was a good crew of lads that stuck with the development squads and actually progressed on right through the senior ranks. So that was probably the start of it when you really bought into, right, I want to be part of this Monaghan setup, and eventually hopefully talk out for Monaghan senior team someday.
Was that would have been the same team then that come up and competed in the Ulster minor final then in 20, I think it was 2008 you reached the minor final, and that started your rivalry with Tyrone, sort of, you lost out to them that day?
It did, yeah, and that was a big year, 2008. Like that county minor team, probably the success of that team probably stemmed off a couple of really strong years in the vocational schools inter-county team for Monaghan, and I remember the SEM team was going well. So there was probably a really good crop of Monaghan underage players between the ages 16 and 18 coming through at that time, and unfortunately we lost that Ulster final in 2008 by a couple of points to Tyrone, and then went on and narrowly lost to Mayo in the All-Ireland quarter after extra time, and ultimately it was those 2 teams, Tyrone and Mayo, that played in the All-Ireland minor final that year, and Tyrone I think won the replay, if I'm right. So we weren't that far away, for such a small county at minor level.
And then you progress up into seniors, Chris. You get the call up, I think, in 2011. Do you remember getting the call up? Was it an actual physical call, or how did you find out about it?
I do remember it. It was kind of the first call up I got was in 2010, would you believe? And that was my first year with the under 21 panel, and Seamus McGuinness and Paul Grimley were the manager and coach of that team. And it just happened to be at the start of 2010. I was in my first year, fresher year with in DCU. So I had said, right, I'm playing decent enough football, I'll go to the under 21 trials. I was asked in by Seamus, and there was actually senior trials as well, and kind of mixed in a few of the under 21s to make up the teams. And I happened to be playing very well. And I remember after one of the games, Seamus actually just called me back and asked me on to the panel. But at the time, I kind of said to myself, I was only turned 19 in the previous October, so I was a wee bit just conscious of where I was at development wise, saying, right, am I ready to go in here at senior inter-county level? And I had a chat with my father, and the fact that I was in Dublin first year, and I wanted to concentrate on have a good experience my first year in college from football point of view with the fresher team, because DCU will put a lot of hard work into the first year as a fresher, and it would have been nice to win a fresher championship, but ultimately that didn't happen. But I I said no. I says I'm going to wait and just maybe time it right. I felt another year, maybe a club level and freshers with DCU would help me. And then I had a really good year that year with the under-21s under Seamus in 2010, and then I suppose the natural progression just came that 2011 arrived, and Eamon McInerney asked me into the panel, and he was over the under-21s that year as well. So it was kind of a stage where under-21s were kind of training with the seniors in and out. So it naturally happened. I don't really remember Eamon McInerney ringing me up or asking me. It probably just naturally happened that you were involved in a training and then you were asked to train, and then all of a sudden you get your first start in Division 1 later that year.
Turning Seamus McInerney down, that's a bold enough move, Chris. It could have backfired that maybe you wouldn't get a second call up, but you were strong enough to go, no, you didn't think you were ready.
Yeah, look, I think Seamus respected my decision, and he understood that I was up in Dublin first year in college, and I think he probably was trying to get me into the setup and use it as a stepping stone. There's not to say that I was going to be playing in my first year, but to get in amongst experienced lads and get a taste of inter-county football as a 19-year-old. But I suppose I'm happy that I made that decision, because everything that followed after that kind of worked out.
Coming in 2011, and you said you're slid into the deep end playing Division 1 football, but I suppose the first couple of years were tough enough, Chris. I know in the league, is it back-to-back relegations, heading down to Division 3, and a couple of disappointing championship defeats. Like Offaly beat us one year and Laois beat us one year in the qualifiers and things like that. Like it was probably a tough enough start to your inter-county career.
It definitely was, and when I go back to it as a 21-year-old, you were focused completely on trying to get the starting jersey. The results weren't coming, and maybe that was a a sign of the couple of years, that the massive effort that the county had put in the previous couple of years under Seamus to get an Ulster title. And maybe there was I just remember when the wins weren't coming, there seemed to be a lot of injuries, and there was a few games we were very close in 2011, and I think we ended up being on the same points as Armagh that year, and they stayed up for better score difference, and Armagh had beat us by a point earlier in the league, so we weren't a million miles away, from staying up. But it was a relatively new panel. There was a lot of changeover of players, and I suppose Monaghan weren't accustomed to losing, going out that early in the back door. In 2011 and 2012, we went out in the first games, as you say, against Offaly and Laois, which was difficult times, because Monaghan felt like they were probably at a crossroads here. Where did they go from here? And thankfully, we got the right man to come in 2013, and in Malachy O'Rourke.
What did he bring, Chris? What was, you say he's the right man? What was it about him, or what changed in 2013 that suddenly you were Ulster champions in a few months' time?
Yeah, it's probably an accumulation of a lot of things, but the big thing is probably the belief that he can put in you as a player, and the belief that he can get a team working towards a common objective. And the more that man talked and set targets that we were able to achieve, and then we started to achieve those targets, throughout the league. We ended up winning Division 3 league in 2013, and that was the first thing. And all of a sudden, the group is seeing that, okay, yeah, everything that we're talking about and wanting to achieve is, we're starting to tick the boxes. And it's probably Monaghan weren't a Division 3 team, with the caliber of some of the players that we had. But we got a good run in the championship in 2013, and it was just everything seemed to click. But there was a serious work ethic amongst that group in 2013, and it probably stemmed from how the management team went about their business, that had everyone working for each other and playing as a team.
I suppose leading into the championship, was an Ulster title on your radar, Chris, or was it just You said about winning the league and momentum and carrying that confidence who's into the championship and stuff. Did you go into the championship thinking we're going to be target this Ulster championship, or how did you enter it?
Yeah, I think it was a realistic goal. It was definitely, I'd say, the first goal would have been to reach an Ulster final, and if you got to that stage, then you'd obviously set your targets for the game itself. But it was just, when you're in the moment under a very strong management team and you're winning games, you start to believe it. When you get a bit of momentum, you start to believe, yeah, we can probably go on here, and we were putting in good performances, and it was getting us results. And then when you arrive at the Ulster final, you don't believe that you can't be beaten, because if you're thinking that, well, I'm going to be beat here on this day, well, there's not really much point in showing up, So we did have Malachy and the lads instilled that belief in us. We believed that we could win the final in 2013. So
You probably would prefer to say we're the only ones probably believe that at the time, because obviously coming in against Donegal, All Ireland champions, Jim McGuinness' side, and it's still, I think it remains the only time McGuinness was ever been beaten in Ulster, that Ulster final. So probably from the outside, Chris, nobody gives you a shot, but you obviously had that belief in your changing room.
Absolutely, yeah. It was probably, the story of the underdog that day. We probably caught Donegal off guard. Again, they're coming off a massive long season after winning the All Ireland the previous year. So we got a tremendous start that day, and I think we probably caught Donegal on the hop. We raced into a 4 or 5 point lead, and I remember Rory Began coming up and kicking his first couple of frees over, and you're kind of sitting. That day I started on the bench that day, and I remember, because I was given the task of being an impact sub for that day after starting the previous 2 games. So it was a shift in, I suppose, my role within the team leading into that. But I knew that it was the type of team that you played where you were asked to play, and you played whatever role you were asked to play. And I suppose I knew going into that game that my role is to come in here when I'm needed, if the team needs me. And you're sitting there watching the lads go 3, 4, 5 points up so early, and the lads beside me on the bench are nearly acting like supporters. There's the cheering and shouting going through the roof, and Clonus is just erupting, and I'm sitting there trying to keep me focused and not get too excited, because you just knew that it could change in a matter of seconds. Donegal come back, and you just had to be ready to come on. I couldn't let myself get too drawn into being a spectator that day. So got the call maybe 25 minutes to go, maybe 20 minutes to go, and was ready to come on. Felt like it was a good enough impact. Got a point, set up a couple of scores, and done what I was asked to do, basically, and the rest is history then when the final whistle went.
How tough was that to take, Chris? Because I know Darren Hughes was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said about, there was a change of team. I think maybe you sacrificed a few forwards to play the likes of, was it Paul Donaghy and Dermot Malone started, just for sort of workhorses around the middle of the field, obviously to play against that Donegal team. So it's obviously a tough one for you, but could you understand where Malachy was coming from? And obviously you said yourself you were waiting to come in from the wings. You were going to get your chance too.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember it very, very well. It was a hammer blow, as a 22-year-old, and having played in the games previously, to be told that we have to hold you back here. And I suppose the biggest thing was not, I couldn't tell anyone. I had to keep. I couldn't even tell my family, and they see me listed down on the program to start, and the number 13, and I remember saying, yeah, looking forward to it, But I quickly was able to switch my mindset to, okay, this is my role here, because we knew with Donegal that they had a serious engine and work rate around the middle third. So I could understand Malachy and the management team's decision to, it's going to be frantic in the first half of the game. There mightn't be many scores. The way Donegal set up, they would be very defensively. And maybe towards the end of the game, it might open up, which might have suited me better. So that was the way Malachy and the lads operated. They just, what they said, you believed. And I suppose initially, yes, I was kind of, disappointed. But I quickly switched the mindset. That's right, this is my role now. Because if I wasn't in the right mindset, I wouldn't have been good for the team, And thankfully, it worked out. And I suppose from that day onwards, I probably, got the name as being more of an impact sub for Monaghan in the years to come, which probably didn't do myself any good by doing that. But that's the role I accepted,
You mentioned coming on and kicking a point. Yourself and Tommy Freeman, I think, both come off the bench to kick scores, and they were sort of the insurance scores later on. Chris, and obviously you were on the field when the final whistle goes, and Monaghan have just won their first Ulster title in 25 years. So what was that like? Mayhem, I'm sure.
It was crazy, and it just happened so quickly. When from 1 second you're sitting watching the game to the next minute you're on the pitch in the thick of the moment. 15, 20 minutes later, you're surrounded by Monaghan fans going absolutely ecstatic. And, the most fulfilling thing at the end of that game was seeing the likes of my clubmate Paul Finlay and the likes of Owen Lennon, Dick Clerk and Tommy Freeman, these lads who had tried so hard in the previous 7-8 years, going to Ulster finals and just being pipped by Tyrone. For them to finally get that Ulster title, that was as much satisfaction to see those lads winning it, because they would have set the standards for Monaghan teams for so many years, and the likes of us coming through the development squads, those were the lads that we were watching year in, year out. So, it was marvellous, because I think it was 25 years from Monaghan. We had won a senior championship and also senior championship. So to be part of that, it was only my third time of trying as part of a senior team set up, and then those other lads might have been trying for 10 odd years, 10 plus years. So I was quite green, I suppose. I was a young fella, and you just thought, sure, this was the natural progression. We thought it'd eventually come, but it was great. It was great, it's in the history now, and it's just great to be part of that.
Dick started that rivalry with Donegal at the time too. Like he's played in 2013 Ulster final, Division 2 league final in 2014, 14 Ulster final, 15 Ulster finals. So he's had plenty of collisions along the way in those couple of years.
We did, yeah, and we just became very accustomed to each other. And even Division 2 league final in 2014, and we just became very familiar foes, and there were titanic battles, a lot of them, and thankfully we come out on top of I suppose in the years that I was involved, we won 13 and 15, 2 out of 3. But I know Donegal might have had a couple more saves in the latter years. They're a phenomenal outfit. But there were massive years for Monaghan football. Getting those 2 Ulsters in 3 years, and delighted to be part of that at the time. Even as a youngster. But the years don't belong flying by. It's crazy to think that's 10 years since Monaghan last won an Ulster.
Not 14 final. You got a goal yourself, Chris, but you maybe just weren't at it that day, were you, in terms of the 13 and 15 finals? 14 just felt Donegal were just that step ahead of you.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember that day. I was tasked with the same kind of role to come on as an impact sub. But Donegal, from the get-go, they just seemed to have an urgency about them. They arrived with a different plan, and we were just struggling. It just wasn't the same as what was happening in 2013. I did come on and we got a goal to bring it back to a point. I think it might have been 1-4 to 8 points, but we didn't kick on after we got the goal. We might have got a few possessions, but we didn't complete the attacks. And on the flip side, Donegal went up, and Paddy McBrearty I just remember shooting the lights out that day. He got a couple of really important scores on the edge of the D, and they just seemed to gather momentum in the last 15 minutes that we couldn't get the grips with, and ultimately they won on the day, and probably rightly so.
The contrast in emotions, obviously, from 2013, the historic achievement of winning it after 25 years, but being on the field when the final whistle goes after losing an Ulster final. Chris, you spoke about the players like the likes of Paul Finlay and Owen Lennon and Dick Clark, and that had been through that down the couple of years against Tyrone. But to experience it yourself, how tough is it seeing opposition fans running onto the field and everything else that goes with it?
Absolutely, in the space of 12 months, you were experiencing both feelings, and it's not a nice place to be. A lot of footballers will experience probably more losses than wins in their career, and that was a sore one. But when you're on the field, you just kind of you don't get to go over and shake hands with your opposition. Like, you're just crowded by the supporters, and so the first thing you're thinking of is how I can get off this field as quick as possible. So you just make your way to the tunnel. But it was a difficult loss, after the elation in the previous year. But it is what it is, You just had to take your medicine and go on, because you did have the back door, which was a quick enough turnaround. I think it was maybe a week turnaround if you were in the back in round of 16 before the quarterfinals. So obviously when you're on the field after losing, you don't be thinking about that straight away, but quickly later on that evening and the next day or two afterwards, you do have to switch your focus straight away, because you're still in the All-Ireland series.
Yeah, and you had that game against Kildare in Croke Park, and the team in rain in the back door then, Chris, and I think you got 1-3 that day, and you won by 2 points after extra time, but it just poured rain all day. I remember I was at that game because Armand Meade, I think, had played before you, and it was just a rainy, wet day all day, but it turned out to be an absolute classic between yourselves and Kildare.
Yeah, it was a crazy game now, to be fair, and probably some of the best goals were ever scored, in championship up there in headquarters. I remember Vinnie Corey scoring a top corner goal, and I think it was Emma Bolton for Kildare. It was crazy, and the rain, probably for the conditions, the torrential rain, it was a really top quality game. The skills of the game were executed really well, and it was an absorbing game. I remember very well, and just when you seemed to feel like you were getting ahead, Kildare come back, and when Kildare probably felt they were getting ahead, we managed a way to sneak it back, and it was a nice win, because I don't think there was another target or objective that was set out by Malachy and his management team, that we this particular team hadn't got a win in Croke Park. So to eventually do that, it was another box ticked, and it just comes back to the point that every objective nearly that Malachy was setting out, you were achieving it as a group, and you just believed it kept a serious belief within the team, and that probably kept it going into 2015, where again we pushed on and got another Ulster.
Just we'll finish with 2014, and we'll move on to happier times then, Chris. But that Dublin game in the All-Ireland quarter-final, we're talking about, your rivalry with maybe Donegal and Tyrone, where, it's a point either way, or you are so close. Then a couple of Dublin games, I think it was 2014 and 2017, I think, in All-Ireland quarter-finals. That Dublin, they're obviously in their pomp under Jim Gavin there. They're going for their 6 in a row. Like, what was it about them that just, I'm sure beforehand, your full belief that you can go out and do it, but they were just steamrolling a lot of teams at that stage, I suppose.
Absolutely. I remember we had a week turnaround from the Kildare game, and it was at the time you were there. Yeah, we get enough recovery, within the week to show up and get a decent performance in. You were coming off a win, and just that Dublin team in 2014. I would have played a lot with them, in a few of them lads on Sigerson with DCU, but they were just, I suppose, at the height of their powers in that era, 2014, 2015. And it was just their ferocious speed and power and handling. It's hard to explain how well conditioned and the high standards of their handling and execution of their skills. We did have a tactic that day, probably more defensive tactic, but we had them, from my memory, we had held them pretty well the first maybe 15, 20 minutes. But then they got 2 goals. I remember Dermot Connolly and Bernard Brogan got 2 goals. And it just put too much daylight between us. And then there was no looking back. I think we were 9 points down 9 or 10 points down at half time. And it was probably just gone out of sight. They weren't taking their foot off the throttle, and we were probably tired legs from the week beforehand, and they were just a serious machine, and we probably got our eyes opened in terms of where they were at, and what they were going to go on to achieve. It was certainly the start of what they were going to go on to achieve, and fair dues to them.
I think you got ankle surgery then at the end of 2014, Chris, and you sort of missed the start of 2015 then, just out with injury.
I did 2015. Funny old year for myself. I just had a wee bit of a tidying up job to do on one of my ankles, and so spent most of January, February that year rehabbing. And I remember joining back in the first full training session with the team. I think it was the week leading into the first National League game, possibly. And the next day, my appendix perforated. So I had a burst appendix, and that put me out for another, 6 weeks. And that kind of curtailed me. I felt like I spent the first, 4 months of the year just going through rehab. Managed to get myself back in time for championship and come on against Cavan in the first round, if I'm right, by a point in Breffni. Featured towards the end of that game, and featured against Fermanagh in the semi-final. And then was hit another killer blow in a club match 4 weeks out from the Ulster final. I got stood on and went over on my ankle, and had a grade 2 tear and ligaments both sides of my ankle. Like that just ruled me out for the Ulster final then. So I did try. I got plenty of cures made and tried everything that I could to get back in time, but there was just probably too much damage done and too short a period to recover. So these injuries normally last 6 to 8 weeks, and I was left with trying to fix it in 4 weeks, but like you would have needed to be full training the 2 weeks leading into the Ulster final. So a funny old year, 2015, probably masked with just injuries, and a kind of year that I on a personal level, I was glad to see the back of. Even though I was part of the winning Ulster team in 2015, it was just one setback after the next. You were always kind of trying to get back, just constantly rehabbing on your own. So it was a difficult enough year, from a personal point of view.
And I suppose that the fact, Chris, that you're injured and that, and you're trying to push and get back into the squad and stuff like that. That's so tough mentally as well. But playing a club game 4 weeks before the final, I don't think that would happen nowadays either.
No, and that was funny. Back in 2015, we would have played a double league, so that would have been 18 league games, and then you had your knockout championship. And I suppose I wasn't was nothing thought of it. 4 weeks was still enough time. We were probably, there was star games listed for our club season where the county beers couldn't play. But this particular one just probably slipped in, and look, it was just a bit of a freak accident in a tackle. But them things happen. Club players that probably aren't exposed to that much, or county players aren't exposed to that much risk now at playing for the club before their county games because of the split season now, so they don't have to worry about it now.
We're on the subject of club, Chris. We'll have to talk about your two senior championship medals to have a Ballybay as well. And I suppose 2012 was a very special one. I think it was the first from 1987. And you mentioned your dad played in the 80s and the 90s, so I'm sure he was a part of that team. And to come, all them years later for you to get your hands on a medal, what was that like?
It was huge, Again, what was I, 21 when we won it. We come up back in the senior in 2009, and 4 years later, we were senior champions in Monaghan, and it was such a special time for our club, to see the supporters, just the joy and elation for people that you grew up with and people that you see on the street every day after 25-year wait. I'd say a lot of teams had gone before us and hadn't won, and Ballybay probably had dipped down the ranks in the 90s, the late 90s to junior level. There's probably a changeover in players, and then all of a sudden, we just got the right balance of, we had the experienced players there, and there was a good group of us younger lads who pushed through from minors, which helped, and look, you need an element of luck. We just happened to find a bit of form that year in 2012. We probably did have an upset. The hurt from the previous year, we lost two semi-finals, semi-final to Latin in the championship and the league. We lost by a point in both games, and sometimes setbacks like that drive a team on, and it definitely motivated us to get back to that same position the following year, and thankfully we went on to win the game in 2012. So very, very cherished memory.
That was before the Scottstown sort of stranglehold on the championship, Chris. So in 2022 you beat them in the final, and as you said, you're 2021 and 2012, you're probably thinking this is the start of something, you'll be doing this every year. So 10 years down the line, was the feeling much different, or how was it in 2022?
Yeah, it was probably a feeling of relief, to finally get across the line, because we had 10 years of trying. I think maybe the only year since 2012 that we didn't make a semi-final was 2015. So we had always nearly lost the semi-final. 2018 and 2020, we obviously got to the finals and lost against Scotstown, but every other year it was we were being beat in the semi-finals by the eventual winner of the championship. So to finally get across the line in 2022 was very special, and a big thing to do with it is, I've said this to a lot of people, is you do need a full panel, a healthy panel, no injuries, to be in with a chance of winning a senior championship in Monaghan. And even if you just go back and look at the years, the teams that have won it, I know Scotstown's won a large amount of them, but the years that they'll have won it, similar to Canterbury and ourselves, the team that won it in each respective year had their full team bill of health, So for us, it's always a must. Like, when we have a full panel to pick from, we know we have a really good chance of pushing for a senior championship.
Through it all, Chris, I know you're still playing for Ballybay at club level, but through county and club, what's the highlight? What's the one best thing?
The one best thing, I'd probably have to say 2022's championship win, because I had my young son there and my young daughter, and it's just a nice wee picture of me standing with my brother and the two kids in her arms. So it's one that I look back fondly on, and hopefully have another kid there, Keelan. He's 2 now, so it'd be nice maybe before I retire that I could get another one and get all 3 of them in the picture.
We're saying ever.
Never say never.
Chris, good man. Thanks very much for coming on. Really enjoyed the chat, and great to hear from you. And best luck. Hopefully, you get that 3rd championship medal and not to get all 3 of them in the picture.
Thanks a million, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.